Just checking to make sure everything is rocking and rolling here at Rumble, on X, on Twitch, on all the good stuff. So let's check that out, and then we'll get started with what we got going on today. Okay, very good, excellent, cool. We look solid. Well, can't have that in the background. Okay, there we go. Very good. All right, fantastic. That only took like 40 seconds. So great. Hello, welcome. My name is Aaron Mashbitz. Welcome to the stream, whether you're on X, Twitch, Rumble, YouTube, all of the above, all at once. Thank you for being here. I host a podcast called Something for Everybody, which is on all major podcast platforms. And the majority of those conversations on that podcast surround mindset, mental health, and personal development. And so I'll be diving into that area of conversation tonight. There's a video online. I haven't watched the video. But apparently it's about the hidden brain injury behind Dr. Jordan Peterson. If you don't know, Dr. Jordan Peterson right now is very, very sick. According to Michaela, his daughter, he's getting a little bit better. But Dr. Jordan Peterson has had a lot of health scares over the years. So I'm assuming this doctor psychiatrist is going to explain what might be happening with Dr. Jordan Peterson, his brain, the medication he was taking, all that stuff that might be going on with him, so we can figure out maybe that's happening to other people, or maybe we can help Dr. Jordan Peterson, or hopefully he's on the mend and he's getting better. I've stated on a lot of podcast episodes and a lot of streams how much Dr. Jordan Peterson has influenced and impacted my life, especially when becoming a father. I'm a brand new father. My son is almost 5 months old. And so I absolutely wish him the best. I'm a subscriber to Peterson Academy, and the classes on there are absolutely incredible. And I'm 33 years old, already graduated college, still looking to learn. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely check it out. It's the best bang for your buck you're probably ever going to get. And so hopefully we can just learn in real time about psychiatric medication from this psychiatrist. And maybe we can help more people not have to go through the same thing Dr. Jordan Peterson is going through, because the more educated we are in these certain things, the better informed decisions we can make, especially when we're talking to a doctor or a psychiatrist or whatever the case may be. The more information we have to equip ourselves, the better. So let's jump in and let's see if we can learn a little bit about what's going on with the brain injury of Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Currently, Dr. Jordan Peterson is very ill, and I'm speculating that some of what is going on now may be related to a severe and under-recognized adverse reaction to a benzodiazepine that he experienced back in 2020. And so in today's video, I want to explain what that reaction is, how it can unfold, and most importantly, what you need to know to reduce the risk of this happening to you or someone that you care about.
Cool.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Joseph Wittduring. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist. I used to work at the FDA, and I'm an expert in adverse reactions to psychiatric side effects. Let's get into it. Now, everything that's happened with Dr. Peterson has surrounded a class of medications called benzodiazepines. These are sedative medications that slow the brain down. And common benzodiazepines are things like Xanax, Klonopin, and Valium. Now, these drugs are typically given out for anxiety and depression. However, because they cause a physiological dependence, most doctors do not recommend taking them long term. And this didn't just happen to Dr. Peterson. This is in fact happening to many Americans around the country. Because as you can see in this graphic here, which shows all the psychiatric medication use, for both women here on the left and for men, this sort of red dotted line that you're seeing here, this represents benzodiazepines. And as you can see, these are the second most commonly prescribed psychiatric medications out there. And so if we look over here, if you're age 50 and a female, roughly 10% of women over age 50 are on these medications.
Wow.
And then for men, roughly 5% of men over age 50 are on these medications. That's 1 in 20. Now, the first thing I want to show you is Dr. Peterson explaining to Joe.
That's like a lot. That's like a lot. I talk about mental health and mindset a lot. I've experienced some very deep personal tragedy when it comes to mental health and medication and things of that nature. I lost my sister in 2018 to suicide. I've seen medication really help people, and I've seen also it create even more problems. I think what's most important when thinking about medication is that in my personal opinion, it should not be sort of this magic bullet, and it can't be because it isn't. It doesn't work like that. And it should not be the first option. Should not be the first option. There should be lifestyle changes: eating well, moving well, sleeping well, thinking well, eating well, moving well, sleeping well, thinking well, lifestyle factors, all those types of things: lifestyle management, stress management, coping skills, talk therapy, the laundry list of everything you should possibly do to help your mental health, to be proactive about your mental health. And then if nothing is working and your situation keeps getting more and more serious and you're suicidal and you have suicidal ideation, or like my sister, you have bipolar disorder and you have schizophrenia, then yes, then with all these lifestyle modifications and the right sort of proactive mental health toolkit, then potentially medication can be and should be an option for life-saving treatment. I do agree with that. But I think nowadays in the mental health field, we're just passing out these pills like candy, and then we become addicted to them. And then when we try to get off of them, cold turkey, that causes so many downstream dangerous effects that we shouldn't be doing that, but we don't really know what else to do. And so again, information is key. Equipping yourself with the right information is key. That's why we're watching this video together. Here we go.
Rogan, how he got on these medications to begin with. Let's go.
What was stressful when I first got, I've had a history of depression, and that runs in my family, and that's probably stems back from me right to the time when I was a kid. And I think when I really got sick in 2016, it was partly a manifestation of that. But at the time, my job was threatened, like actually.
Right. Yeah.
And my clinical practice was threatened. And the Canadian Revenue Agency was after me all at the same time. And they were after me because of a mistake they had made, which they admitted 3 months later. And the college was after me because of a vindictive client who came after me with a pack of lies, but because they were so, and basically I emerged from that unscathed, but that was by no means obvious that that was going to be the case. I was accused of sexual misconduct. And the evidence? When I was dealing with this client, I would turn my wedding ring around.
You'd spin it?
Well, I play with it.
Right. And that
Well,
was sexual misconduct?
Yeah, well, to her, it was a signal of some dark underlying desire that that was polluting our therapeutic relationship.
So unfortunately, when you're dealing with people that are extremely troubled, oftentimes they look for external reasons why they're troubled, and they find oppressors.
Well, she was also angry with me because when all this blew up around me, it interfered with my clinical practice, and she had come to rely on our weekly meetings. And so she was angry about being abandoned. And it was really sad because I didn't want to abandon my clients, but I had to stop my clinical practice, which was also very upsetting to me because I had like 20 clients and I knew these people, man. Like I knew these people.
Yeah.
You know, I'd followed them through thick and thin. And then all of a sudden, so many things piled up around me that I found when I was in a clinical session that I was distracted. So you can't be distracted in a clinical session.
Right.
And so, anyways, what emerged from that, and it was in the middle of the winter, and I have seasonal affective disorder, I couldn't sleep at all for quite a long time. And I went to my doctor and I said, I can't sleep. And he gave me a sleeping medication and an anti-anxiety drug. And I took a little bit of the anti-anxiety drug and I could sleep.
So that was Klonopin, 0.25 milligrams twice a day.
And my life was pretty stressful. And I thought, okay, I'm much better. I'm just going to leave this be. This is working.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. And my main commentary on this is so human and completely understandable. So Dr. Peterson, he has a history of depression. He's talked about it for a long time. Also some autoimmune problems as well. And so he's got that in the background. But on top of that, in 2016, he experiences unprecedented levels of fame because he really is sort of pushing back against a woke agenda, and it's around the whole transgender issue. And he gets thrown into the international spotlight. His work is threatened, tax situations, clients are unhappy, not able to focus, struggling to sleep. When all of these things pile up on you and you can't sleep and you're feeling awful and you can't even focus at work, most of us would want to reach out for a medication. And Jordan Peterson's been very open. He's taken antidepressants before. And so he's familiar with that. So it's really easy to see how he ends up on this medication. He just starts taking it, trusting it because he's taken other psychiatric medications in the past. So I'm going to jump forward now and show you some clips from a different interview that he did with his daughter, Michaela. And just
look, I mean, potentially, right, in 2016, when everything was happening for Dr. Jordan Peterson, it might have been better for him than jumping on the medication. Now, this is just speculation, right? Hindsight, Monday morning quarterback bullshit from my end. But like, since he was thrusted into the spotlight and had stress and tax and all these types of new things in his life, maybe it would have been better if he had spoken to someone who'd maybe dealt with something like this before to understand how to navigate these waters and then understand, okay, how can I still get some rest and get this done? What's one little thing I can do? All these types of things, maybe some lifestyle preventative coping factors before sort of really relying on the medication. But he said he couldn't sleep for a very, very, very long time. So maybe he did try all that stuff and maybe nothing worked. Maybe he exhausted all of his resources and nothing was getting any better. I mean, there's tons of people right now who can relate to that story, maybe not specifically being thrusted into the limelight like Dr. Jordan Peterson, but like having so many fucking things happening at once. Stress, job, family, money, everything raining down on you all at once. We feel like we can't just get our fucking head above water and we need a little bit of help. And I think that's probably what Dr. Jordan Peterson was feeling at this time. And he relied on the medication. That's why I think in our society, what we need to do is become a society that is proactive about our mental health, which means teaching kids, as young as 10 years old, how to be proactive with their mental health. What does that mean? That means eating right, moving well, sleeping well, thinking well, stress management, coping skills, moving our body, meditation, journaling, everything that we can possibly do to be proactive. So when the inevitable hardships enter our life, we have that much more ability to armor ourselves and protect us and get through it. Not saying we're going to be perfect or unscathed. That's not going to be the case. We are going to be knocked down really, really fucking hard in life. And life is going to punch us in the face. And we may feel exactly like Dr. Jordan Peterson did. And he has all the skills and all the tools. He teaches people how to do it all the time. He has a freaking academy and all these things that he teaches people, right? But it's still life hit him hard and he needed a little bit of help. So what do we do in that instance? What can be healthy for us, safe for us, and effective for us? And the more information you have, the better. So let's keep moving forward.
Provide a timeline. Jordan becomes really famous in 2016. And this interview with Michaela that you're about to see, I believe it's in 2020. So he's on the medication for about 4 years when he starts to get really, really sick. And the condition that he's experiencing is a condition called BIND. It stands for benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction.
Wow.
And essentially, it's a type of neurotoxicity that happens when you take benzodiazepines long term. This does not happen in everyone, but there is a substantial minority of patients where this drug actually hurts their brain over time and they get sicker, almost like a chemotherapy or some kind of toxic reaction. It actually damages neurons and people feel sicker over time. Now, as you can see here from this article from Alexis Ritvo and the Colorado Consortium, these are academics out of Colorado, benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction has only been recently identified. And so this article was published in 2023. Now, this has been going on for a long time, but it's only experienced widespread recognition recently. And this condition causes several symptoms. And I'm going to go over some of them that you'll see here in this article. Now, here's a table of all of the symptoms. The symptoms are listed on the left, and on the right, you see duration of symptoms where survey respondents, there's been
Low energy, nervousness, anxiety, fear, difficulty focusing, feeling distracted, sleep disturbances, memory loss, sensitivity to light, noise. Wow, so many things. It's interesting to have him here that this is like just become sort of public mainstream with this issue that comes with the benzos. Very interesting so far. Good information.
1,200 of them who have suffered from this condition have rated in percentages how long it lasted for. So, if this one says 51%, so this means 51% of people experienced low energy for years. And so there are a few symptoms here from BIND that I want to bring your attention to, because this is things that Jordan has talked about experiencing. So firstly is akathisia, this need to move around in pace. You'll hear him describe that. We also have things like balance problems, heart rhythm irregularities or blood pressure issues. And this can make it seem like you're dying of another condition. A lot of people don't relate this back to benzos. There are things like stabbing pains, burning, aching sensations, or joint pains. Many of these patients have neurological symptoms in their hands. They feel numb.
It makes sense why some of these things would lead to not being able to sleep. And so not only it's sleep disturbances, like you have all these other things that are leading you to feel basically like shit all day. And so why would you be able to go to sleep? And then you can't get sleep, and then everything compounds because you have no energy. Low energy is at the top of the list, and then it's just sort of a cycle of everything compounding on one another.
Sleep disturbances as well, difficulty focusing, sensitivity to noise and light. There are a whole host of very uncomfortable symptoms that hit people who suffer from this condition. Now, when we listen to this report shortly, you'll notice that Jordan slowly notices the onset of this toxicity, starts to feel worse. He'll actually describe feeling weak, detached, and feeling less joyful, and then experiencing very severe anxiety. He's also going to report that when he goes onto a higher dose, it makes him worse,
Mm.
which is a sign that he's having a drug toxicity. Because usually, if you're taking an anti anxiety med like Klonopin, if you go to a higher dose, your symptoms of anxiety go down. But if you do that and you get worse, it's a sign the drug is toxic to your nervous system. Anyway, let's.
That's a really important piece of information for people to understand. If you take a higher dose, usually the thing that you're trying to attack will go down. Again, this is just general information. General information. It's got to be very specific to you. Please talk to a doctor or mental health professional if you're thinking about doing any of these things. But if you take a higher dose and it doesn't get any better, this guy is saying that it's because the drug is a toxin to your nervous system, and that should be a sign, an absolute sign for you to go do something about it. And again, we're going to have a personal account from it from Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Jump into it and have a listen to him talking to his daughter.
But I took the benzodiazepine the way that it was prescribed, twice a day, 0.25 milligrams. And that seemed to bring the symptoms to a pretty rapid halt, which is also part of the reason I didn't need the Imivane. And then there were so many other things going on around me at that time that I never really thought about it again. You know, I thought that it was a relatively harmless drug, and I was taking it in a prescribed fashion at not too high a dose. And I developed symptoms that I now recognized were associated with its use. Weakness on my left side, and like a feeling of detachment from people around me, people I loved, some decrease in the ability to experience joy. But it wasn't until much later that I actually associated with benzodiazepine use.
Yeah.
And when your mom got so sick, my anxiety levels had been climbing up again.
Yeah, that was unbearable. I mean, the response I had, if you're told your parent or your wife of almost 30 years has no chance and is going to be dead in the next 10 months, that's what we were told. That
Yes.
surgery doesn't help, and that chemo doesn't help, and that this is a fast growing cancer and you're screwed no matter what.
Right.
That's what we heard in one day. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, then we
anxiety.
went all over North America, to New York and to Houston and to LA, looking for different opinions before we decided to settle on surgery. But
And everyone gave us the same opinion.
yes, which was that nothing is going to help, but surgery was probably the best low probability bet.
Yeah.
So I asked my doctor to increase the benzodiazepine dose, but what seemed to happen as a consequence of that was that I just got more anxious. So again, in retrospect, it seems like I had a rather uncommon but not unheard of reaction to benzodiazepines, where increased dose makes anxiety worse instead of better. So then at one point, when things weren't getting better and Tammy was still in the hospital, I was trying to take care of her. We had lots of help. I stopped taking them entirely.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. So to recap, at this point when his wife gets diagnosed with
Before we go, I also just want to mention that I think that's why it's important to understand symptoms. There's a lot of mental health education out there, and I think that's why we want to understand maybe the symptoms of bipolar disorder, the symptoms of depression, or the symptoms of suicidality, or whatever the case may be, because then we can be more aware of that, maybe within ourselves and with our loved ones. And I think that's an important thing when just trying to educate ourselves generally about mental health, is that the symptoms are important to understand. Maybe they're not exact, from what you read or what you heard, right? But there's something similar that you're feeling, this symptom that's related to these things that you read or someone you heard who had the same story or same issue. And then you can become aware of that. And then you can actually do something about it, right? Awareness, acceptance, action. Anyways, I just want to say that. So let's jump back in.
Cancer. He's been on them for several years now. It's probably around 3 years. Already, in retrospect, he's noticing the drugs making him worse. The anxiety increases understandably because his partner is potentially going to die, and he increases the dose, and that makes him worse. And so he's dealing with this terrible life stressor and also a kind of a smoldering drug toxicity that's slowly hurting his neurons in the background. Now, things start to unravel extremely quickly at this point, because once you've developed this neurotoxicity to the benzos, you start to feel really sick. You go up on the dose, nothing happens. Doctors will start to tell you that you have treatment-resistant depression or severe depression. Many physicians out there do not recognize benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction or protracted withdrawal. Now, I say that because protracted withdrawal or bind, it goes by two names, has only just been added to the drug labels in 2021. And so this is the drug label from Xanax XR, and it talks about how symptoms, protracted withdrawal symptoms or bind, can last more than 12 months. And they can include symptoms like all of these awful things: anxiety, cognitive impairment, depression, formication. This is the feeling like insects are crawling on your skin. Motor symptoms, muscle weakness, tremors, paresthesias. This is like numbness and tingling. Tinnitus is ear ringing. And so many doctors don't recognize this. Now, what Jordan is about to describe is that his doctors start to panic, and I imagine in the background they're saying, well, you probably have severe depression. Let's put you on ketamine. And you can't take ketamine while you're on benzos, because some of the science shows that benzodiazepines will block the effect of ketamine. So they put him through a rapid taper. So he says he comes off them for about a week, but he gets substantially worse. For many of my patients, and I treat a lot of these folks with benzo injuries, you can kind of have this smoldering toxicity building up where you're getting sicker and sicker, but your nervous system is very unstable because the neurons are hurt. If you then throw it into an acute withdrawal, you are extremely sensitive to it. But not only is it very painful physically and emotionally to go into the withdrawal itself can be harmful. And that's why we use this term protracted withdrawal injury a lot in the drug withdrawal space, because for many patients, what they notice is that when they come off the drugs very rapidly, they have an electrical storm in the brain, severe symptoms. They then try and go back on the drug, and those symptoms don't go away. And the reason the symptoms don't go away after that severe withdrawal, which has totally turned their life upside down, is they're not withdrawal symptoms anymore. It's just a sign of further neurological damage. It's like a second hit to the brain. So he's had one hit to the brain from just this building toxicity over several years. And then when he rapidly comes off, it's another hit. And he's going to describe a little bit more about what that was like. Let's listen.
Tried ketamine, which is a treatment for depression. Well, neither of those were a very good idea as it turned out. So I had to stop taking benzodiazepines entirely.
Again, before he goes into that, another reason why it's important to understand the symptoms, because you could be misdiagnosed. I did a video that's going to come out on my podcast soon about bipolar disorder, and sometimes bipolar disorder gets misdiagnosed as just depression because people will go in to see the doctor or seek help when they're in the low state, and they sort of forget about the manic state that they might be in, and so it gets misdiagnosed, and then it gets mistreated, and then you can't actually get better and get stable treatment for your bipolar disorder. And so that's similar to this idea here that it gets mistreated as just this thing, and then you get more of this, and then it makes it worse, and then you get the toxins, and then you try to get off of it, and then there's this whole sort of what is it, like confluence of ideas and factors come together that make you really, really sick, like Dr. Jordan Peterson. So let's see what he has to say.
Take the ketamine.
Oh, yeah.
Then I didn't go. Then I stayed off them for something approximating
a week.
Not knowing that that was a very bad idea. And I often think I should have known these things because I did a lot of scientific research when I was a graduate student on alcoholism. And I knew that alcohol and benzodiazepines and barbiturates were all the same chemical class, at least in terms of their effect on neurological effects. But what I knew about benzodiazepines was that they were comparatively safe compared to barbiturates, which they basically replaced. But that's much less true than everybody who's taking them hopes.
Now, so barbiturates were the common anxiety sedatives people used to use prior to like the 1950s when benzos came on the market. And it's true, benzos are less likely to cause respiratory depression and make you stop breathing, but they have much worse withdrawal. And, you know, it's not really Dr. Peterson's fault that he didn't know this. I mean, he's a specialist in psychology, but the doctors who are looking after him should have known that if you've been on this drug for like 4 years or something like that, you can't just stop it in a week. That's incredibly destabilizing.
And they're very widely.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty ridiculous sort of piece of malpractice there, and piece of advice that he got from his doctors. But anyways.
Prescribed, and I don't remember what the probability of developing a dependency on them is if you take them for more than 2 weeks. It's 50%, I believe.
It's something like 50%.
Yeah, if you take them for 2 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, and over 4 weeks, it's much, much higher.
Right.
And most people prescribe them, stay on them for life. And that could have something to do with the fact that they're very difficult to get off of.
Yeah, so dependency means if you stay on them for any more than like 2 to 4 weeks, you're physically dependent on it and you will go into withdrawal. And then you have to come off in a gradual way. Otherwise, you get hit with severe anxiety and insomnia. And that's why people can get trapped on this drug. And that's why it's really important to only take it short term.
Yeah, well, it was unbelievably unpleasant. I mean, it was unbearably unpleasant. And so I started started tapering off when Tammy was in the hospital, but I couldn't push that too fast because it wasn't bearable.
And what do you mean it wasn't bearable?
My anxiety levels went higher than anything I'd ever experienced. And I also developed this condition called akathisia. And the best way I can describe that is that it was like being jabbed with something, but with a prod, like a cattle prod, something electric or something sharp, nonstop for hours, for all the hours I was awake. It was absolutely, I couldn't sit or lay down or stop moving. And even if I did get up and move, it wasn't like that made it better. I just couldn't stop doing it. It was horrible.
I've worked with many patients who have had this condition. I mean, that sounds awful, but there's really no words to describe how terrible it is. I mean, imagine feeling driven to move every second of the day, never feeling calm, never feeling relaxed, and you're getting electrical shocks that are going down your face and down the back of your neck and your body, and you keep on jolting. And while you're experiencing that, you have cognitive impairment and severe anxiety. You're stuck in the most negative place in the world, where everything is catastrophic and, you know, your world is going to end. It can really go on for several months. I've seen this go on for a year in some of my patients before it starts to settle down. And this will make people suicidal.
And things just fell apart more and more. Tammy recovered rather miraculously in the middle of August. But I continued my sort of downhill spiral and ended up in a clinic on the Eastern Seaboard that claimed they could do a rapid benzodiazepine detox, which was a complete bloody lie.
Yeah, well, what we figured was we didn't realize that there was this physical dependency until you stopped to try and do the ketamine. And then we tried tapering and you couldn't stand it because of the akathisia. And so we thought, well, let's go get some professional help.
Right.
So Michaela and Dr. Peterson are way more knowledgeable than most people about this subject. But this is where my perspective starts to veer a little bit. And they acknowledge this later on, that this does not help him. But people will look at someone like Dr. Peterson, who is having severe symptoms and who is trying to come off a benzodiazepine and say, oh, he's just like addicted. He just can't handle the withdrawal. Like he's not strong enough to push through the withdrawal symptoms. We're just going to bring him into a residential facility. We're going to kind of pull him off the medications. Like if he's on Klonopin, we'll put him on Valium. That's called the Ashton protocol. Valium is a longer acting benzodiazepine. It's a bit more sedative. Some people tolerate tapering off that more. And so they look at this as like, hey, we're just going to like tweak the way we remove this drug out of your system. Maybe we'll do it more gradually. You'll be in a nice setting. Maybe you get some other comfort medications. Maybe there's some massage and, different things like that. That is not what is going on now. This has now ceased to be I'm just dependent on this medication and it's hard to bring it out. Jordan Peterson has a neurological injury at this point. And you know that because, he came off the medication, things got worse. He goes back on. He's still really sick. He develops akathisia. You heard before when he went to a higher dose, that didn't work either. That made him actually feel worse. What we're looking at is more like someone who's had a severe concussion, someone who's fallen out a window, someone who's had chemotherapy for cancer, and now they've had neurological damage, which can sometimes happen. So he just has damaged neurons. And so this is the really hard part about this condition. There is not much someone can do at this point. So when I see patients like this who have damaged nervous systems, what I tell them to do is we are going to just slowly taper you.
I apologize for his sort of fuzzy mic action. Hopefully he can. I mean, it's not going to get fixed right now. I obviously did the whole video, and the video has like almost 500,000 views. But I apologize because I can hear it, so it's kind of annoying. But anyways, the video is great, so it doesn't matter.
Off the medication over time, maybe over a year or so, but you cannot expect the symptoms to improve immediately. Most of these patients, after they've had this injury, it will take them about 18 months to 2 years to recover. And you essentially just bring the drug down very gradually because you have to get the drug out because the drug is toxic. And then you support their physical health and then you keep them alive. But all of these different things that they end up doing shortly, such as, going to these rehabs, swapping benzos, trying different tapers, you'll notice that they get into this severe panic because he's so sick. I mean, he talks about being on the verge of ending his life at times. It's completely understandable. You would be panicking. Your family would be panicking. And so they start reaching for straws all the way up into actually leaving the country and trying to get different care. And this is just very common for people when they get super sick. They reach out for anything that can help. Let's listen to this.
And I went to the clinic on the understanding that they could do a multi-day detoxification and treatment for withdrawal. And when I got there, what they told me instead was that they'd substitute one benzodiazepine for another, which wasn't the least bit helpful because clonazepam was already a long-acting benzodiazepine, and they're easier to wean off than the shorter-acting benzodiazepines. And they had nothing to offer, essentially. I came out of that clinic worse than when I went in. So,
like significantly worse.
Yes.
On two more sedative-like drugs in order to dampen down the akathisic symptoms.
Right.
And the other issue is once you've damaged your neurons.
Before we hear from him, this makes me think of, not to joke, but like how stupid those people are at that rehab place or wherever he went. It's like, if you ever seen Talladega Nights, and obviously Ricky Bobby gets in that car accident, he thinks his legs don't work, and so he stabs himself in the leg with a knife to try and prove to his friends that he's paralyzed. But then he realizes he can feel the knife in his leg, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And then they stab another knife in his leg to get the other knife out, and then it's like 3 knives are in his leg to get the one knife out. That's what this is like. It's like that fucking scene from Talladega Nights, and that's a comedy humor. This is like someone's real life, and so again, that's why it's important to find information that's real and legit about the things that you're going through so you can equip yourself as best as possible, so that we don't get put in these even worse situations than when we walked in, especially when you're dealing with something as serious related to your health and your mental health and your physical health, like Dr. Jordan Peterson is dealing with.
It's very hard to take new medications. You become highly reactive and sensitized to them. Most people have side effects to new meds. You cannot take new drugs to sort of dampen these symptoms coming from damaged neurons. And so that's also why he's getting worse.
which wasn't helping much.
Given the fact that the benzodiazepines were causing the akathisia.
Yes.
Yeah,
So, and then I went back to Toronto,
that's November.
and things maintained their downhill trajectory, apart from the fact that Tammy was recovering quite nicely, which of course was great. But then I ended up in the hospital in Toronto, and the hospital I ended up in was also worse than useless.
Yes.
So, and I don't remember this part of it from December 15th onward. You and Andre, your husband, took me out of that hospital, and we went to Russia, of all places, near Moscow, to try a treatment offered by a clinic there that used
They used propofol and Dextor.
right propofol as a heavy sedating agent, which
Yeah.
basically made me unconscious for 9 days.
Yeah, so you were completely out for 9 days.
Well, I also had pneumonia, which I
Yeah.
developed apparently in the hospital in Toronto. Well, yeah, it was quite entertaining, the whole
Sheesh.
string of events.
We got questions about, why on earth would you go to Russia when you could get, world-class care in North America? And the reason for that was because we had tried the Ashton protocol. Switching over to Valium, we tried the Ashton protocol, and lots of people have success with that, although it sounds horrible.
And lots of people don't have success with it.
Yeah, I put out the first family update we did was when you went to the first rehab center in the States. And after I put that out and said, this is what's going on, I had hundreds, if not thousands of people respond, telling me how horrible benzodiazepine withdrawal could be, how they couldn't work, how they were pacing around their backyards for a year. And they basically said, just keep them alive.
So there's a lot there. So the first thing that I want to break down here is just how awful this can be to your life. So if you look over here, this is from one of these articles on benzodiazepine injury, and it says 56% experience, it was so significant it affected their marriage or other relationships. 54% had suicidal thoughts or thought about attempting suicide. 46% lost a job, were fired, were unable to work. I mean, that's what happened with Dr. Peterson. He took a hiatus from work, experienced significant increases in medical costs, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it's what you would imagine if you had a traumatic brain injury, because that is what we are talking about. Now, I would not recommend going to Russia or any of these other places. I mean, it's understandable in the context of their story. They're just panicking and looking for help. But that advice that Michaela talks about receiving from all those thousands of people that reached out to her is really the treatment. You keep them alive. You stabilize them on a dose of the medication, usually where they began, and then you just gradually taper them off, because he has to taper because the drug is toxic, but you have to do it in such a way where it comes down in a way they can.
I mean, just hearing it right now in hindsight, it just makes so much logical sense that that's what you would do. It just makes so much logical sense that that's what you would do. Why was it so hard for a doctor that Dr. Peterson went to help them with that? I mean, this guy was essentially dying. His wife was dying, everything was going wrong, and he couldn't get the proper treatment. And now, right now, currently in this very day, we haven't gotten an update from Michaela Peterson in a while, but he's still very, very, very sick. The last update was that he's getting a little bit better. So God willing, he makes a full recovery. But when you listen to this guy just say that's what you do, gradually taper off and keep them alive. Why wasn't that advice given or that treatment given to Dr. Jordan Peterson? It makes you think.
Tolerate it. It's usually never easy because they're already very dysregulated, but you bring them down slowly, you keep them alive, and generally within 18 months to 2 years, you recover. And so that's what should have happened.
When I asked them how long the akathisia was likely to last, they said, well, it could be 2 years. And I thought, no one could live like this for 2 years. It's like, you can't live for 2 years if you're being constantly prodded with something excruciatingly painful on a moment-to-moment basis. It's just not and there's no escape. There's no relief. That's just not possible. It wasn't possible. The reason I did survive certainly wasn't because I was enjoying my life. The reason is that I had family that I was very attached to and friends who went above and beyond the call of duty, helping to care for me. But the experience was intolerably dreadful.
I mean, you can hear it in his voice and see it in his face that he stared at death when he was going through this. And you can tell, if not for his family, he wouldn't have made it. Now,
I remember recently, maybe a couple years ago, I think he was on the Diary of a CEO, potentially, and I think Stephen Bartlett just asked him a simple question of, how are you? And Dr. Jordan Peterson broke down. And people make fun of him all the time for crying all the time and whatever. One, I think that's fucking lame. But one, it's like, also another thing is like, Dr. Jordan Peterson has been, he's well documented how much he's studied human suffering and the worst atrocities that this human race has ever seen. He's studied those in depth. And that makes him very emotional because he carries that burden. And then I think what happened with him and Stephen Bartlett, when Stephen just asked him, how are you? He thought about all of this stuff. And you can see him sort of breaking down here about how he stared death in the face and his wife stared death in the face, and like his career and his life has been threatened and he didn't know what to do. And it's like, how are you? Well, I'm here. And the amount of people that it seems that Jordan Peterson has in his life that love him and take care of him is unbelievable. And I think he thinks about all of that stuff all at once because his brain is going a million miles an hour when someone asks him that question of how are you, which on my podcast, that's the first question I ask anyone, but I try to say it in an intentional way because I think that's a very profound question. Like, how are you? Really? Honestly? Like, how are you? You know, and you give someone enough time and space to answer that question, they're going to reveal a lot about themselves. And so I think that's what happens to Jordan Peterson when all these emotions start flooding in his brain. He thinks about all of these things all at once, and you can see why he gets emotional about it. Because again, he stared death in the face, and maybe he's doing the same thing right now. We don't know. We haven't gotten an update, but you can see why and how sick he was because of the toxins in his body.
This is the reality of what this is for many people, and we lose many people to this condition. Many people will take their life, but the ones that make it through, generally their family hold them and carry them across the finish line, kicking and screaming. These people don't want to exist when this is happening, and it takes every ounce of family support to make it through this. Now, I'm going to jump forward a little bit in the story, but long story short, Jordan Peterson is in Serbia or Russia. They put him on propofol. That's that heavy anesthetic that killed Michael Jackson. And they sedate him for like 9 days. And while that's going on, they remove the drug. Again, I would not recommend it done that way, but that's just the way it happened. And he comes out the other side. Now, Jordan Peterson describes in other interviews waves and windows beginning after this stage. So generally at the first part of this adverse reaction, for the first 6 to 9 months-ish, people typically have severe pain most of the time, akathisia, but then it starts to break up, and then you'll have a couple of weeks where you feel well, a couple of weeks where you feel miserable and terrible, and that kind of ebbs and flows, generally for around 18 months to 2 years. Let's go have a listen to the Joe Rogan podcast where he talks about how long this lasts for after he comes off the medication.
What long did it take you to recover from the benzos?
Well, when I finally, 2 years, and I haven't fully recovered, but also I was also sick. No, my left hand is quite numb, and was way more numb. Both hands of my feet were like completely numb, and I was in like excruciating pain for 2 years, like pain at levels that I didn't even know was possible.
So as he says, it lasts 2 years. But I hope kind of going through this shows you that this was not like an addiction problem or a dependence problem going on. This was a neurological adverse reaction that harmed neurons. It was brain damage.
I think that's an important piece to understand because you still see the sort of the narrative online is that, Dr. Jordan Peterson is some sort of fucking pill popper and he's addicted to all this shit. But when you listen to this guy who's breaking it down, no, he had a neurological issue. His body basically was being attacked by toxins. And I think that's an important distinction to be made. And people need to be understand that and have a little bit more compassion and probably empathy for anyone who's dealing with this because it seems just absolutely fucking horrible. Horrible.
It is essentially a form of TBI. And that's why even after he's off this drug, 2 years later, he's still recovering and he still has residual symptoms. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is what life looks like for someone after they've had a significant neurological injury like Dr. Peterson. And so what I see with a lot of my patients is after they go through this 2 years, symptoms go down and they're able to resume their life for the most part. However, their brains are still sensitive to things and they can get thrown back into states of neurological dysfunction very quickly. They can be triggered by different things, whether it's drugs or things like mold. And that kind of brings us to this next chapter in the story. So the last clip you saw with Joe Rogan, that was about 3 years ago. But earlier on this year, Michaela Peterson said her dad, Jordan Peterson, was really sick. This was in October, so around like 4 months ago. And let's have a listen to what she says and how this may relate to someone who's had a highly sensitized nervous system.
Hey guys, I have an update on my dad. I'm actually just going to read this. It's on my teleprompter because this is too hard to explain off the cuff, so I wrote it out. This summer has been exceedingly difficult. Dad was in an ICU suffering from pneumonia and sepsis after dealing with a host of neurological issues this summer that we believe stem from CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome due to decades of mold exposure. We don't have a better explanation for his neurological symptoms at the moment other than spiritual attacks.
I've seen this with some of my patients where after they get benzo injured and then nervous system is sensitized, they start reacting, you could start reacting to mold, you can start reacting to different types of foods and things like that. And so he may have been able to handle this before, but now it's affecting him at a much greater level. That's my speculation.
He's been suffering for the last number of years with unexplainable neuropathy and weakness, amongst other symptoms, but they worsened this summer after he cleaned out his parents' basement after his dad, my grandpa, passed away. We weren't able to communicate with Dad really all of September. During the end of the pneumonia, he was diagnosed with critical illness polyneuropathy, which we're hoping is critical illness myopathy, which is bad enough. That's been heartbreaking and brutal on top of everything else. But after almost a month in the ICU, he's been moved out to a less urgent floor.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this video there. So guys, this is speculative. I don't know anything about his condition other than what Michaela is sharing here. But when I've seen patients go through similar things, like if they have a pneumonia or an infection and they take antibiotics, sometimes the antibiotics can make them worse. That's possible too. Now, there's one more video from this, which we won't play, but she essentially says that her dad is getting better. Thank God. Many of my patients with benzo injuries, they will periodically go through these setbacks where symptoms will get really, really bad for a couple of months, but then they will come out of it. To the extent that this is a complicated setback, obviously there's a mold thing going on, there's also pneumonia. I think you can be positive. Based on my experience, I am feeling hopeful that he will get through this. Generally, the longer that people kind of make it past that initial injury from the benzos, the more robust they become. And so I think we should all pray and think about Dr. Peterson and his family and, send them the good energy. But I want to give you this message of hope. Based on the last report from Michaela Peterson, I do think he's going to recover and I do think you can be hopeful about his prognosis. Now, to wrap up this video, now that we understand what happened to Dr. Peterson, the frightening thing that I want to share with you is that, while many people can take benzodiazepines for several years and never have these issues, there's a small group who do. And there's currently no test that can predict whether you are going to be someone who will develop bind or protracted withdrawal.
Mm.
Now, for that reason, I think it's very important that you do not take these medications any longer than 2 to 4 weeks. And then, if you are having problems like anxiety and insomnia, you try all of the non drug interventions before you begin relying on a medication like this. Anyway, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like learning about what's happened with Dr. Peterson,
Yes. You know, I thought that was a really good video, really good explanation, a really good video. So thank you for putting that together. And yeah, short stream for me tonight. That's the only video that I'm going to look at tonight. If you can see, like, look at all these marks. My son was basically laying on me for like 2 hours. He got his 4 month shots today, so he's in a little pain. So he wanted to snuggle, and he drooled all over me. So I that's why I wore this hoodie, especially for a video about Dr. Jordan Peterson. But I'm glad it ended on a high note. Yeah, I'm optimistic, and optimistic for anyone who's dealing with the exact same thing that Jordan Peterson is going through, or anyone who's dealing with something really, really hard. Um, let's pray that it gets better. God bless. Let's take one small little step forward that could potentially make things better. Let's be a little bit more kinder, a little bit more compassionate, because literally you just don't know what somebody's going through. You don't. And so hopefully, yeah, Dr. Jordan Peterson or anyone dealing with this exact same thing recovers fully. We can see him back in the world doing what he does best, or being with his family, or whatever the case may be. So that's it for me tonight. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As a reminder, I host a podcast called Something for Everybody, which is on all major podcast platforms. And again, majority of the conversations are around mindset, mental health, and personal development. So if you're interested in that, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all that good stuff. And then wherever you're watching this, like, subscribe, share, and I will see you guys on the next stream. Cheers.